Welcome to Calcast, your Create International podcast. GodNetworkNews, where we give you a new perspective
on events happening in our world today.
This is GNN.
This is God Network News, episode 281. Welcome, GNN fans, to another episode of God Network News, the podcast that tells you what God's doing around the world. Not what CNN tells you, but what GNN tells you is going on in the world. If you're tired of listening to all of that crisis network news and you want to hear what God's doing, well, give us a listen.
Welcome, fellow knowledge seekers. We've just received a really compelling stack of documents. They detail this incredibly rapid and frankly remarkable cultural shift that's happening in a remote corner of West Africa. And this isn't just about some localized religious change. It's a stunning, measurable demonstration of exponential growth. And it's all fueled by this highly specific, repeatable method.
That's really what makes this set of sources so extraordinary, you know? Mm-hmm. Our mission today is to do a deep dive into the story of the Chokosai people of Ghana. We're going to be analyzing these documents that describe a unique grassroots movement that it sprung up, gained structure, and held its first major public gathering in just 3 months.
3 months. That's the part I can't get over.
Exactly. So we'll be looking at their history, the demographics, the specific sort of low-tech methods they used, and really analyzing the speed itself. The velocity of this movement, especially in what's traditionally been a pretty resistant environment, is what just demands this kind of analysis.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The documents, they seem to focus primarily on a man named Emmanuel.
And his wife, Christiana.
Right, and his wife, Christiana. And they're using a method called Discovery Bible Studies, or DBS, among the Chikosi. But what stands out immediately is just the audacity of that timeline. 3 months is usually the orientation period for an aid worker, you know. But here, it's the entire time frame from arrival to celebration.
It is. The speed and the sheer numbers, the numerical success, that's the central mystery we need to solve.
And it really demands an investigation into the method itself, doesn't it?
It has to be, because standard church planting methodology and what's called an unreached people group, you usually measure progress in years, often 5 to 7 years before you see the kind of public manifestation that's documented right here in these papers.
Okay, so before we get into the how, the mechanics of it all, you're saying we need to set the stage.
We have to. The environment matters just as much as the methodology.
Absolutely. So let's dedicate this first section to the context. Who exactly are the Chikosi people? Because I think understanding their specific history and their geography really shows us how high the barriers to entry actually were.
Yeah, you're right. Demographically, the sources tell us they number approximately 122,000 people in Ghana, mostly in the northeastern part of the country. But their identity isn't really rooted in Ghanaian soil in the same way as their neighbors. Their history is.
Well, it's complex. It goes back to the mid-1700s.
And where did they come from?
They trace their origins back to a contingent of mercenaries who departed from what is now Côte d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast.
Mercenaries from the 18th century. That suggests a very specific, and I imagine a pretty tense relationship with the surrounding tribes, even today.
That is.
They didn't show up as, peaceful settlers. They came as highly skilled, paid military help. That's exactly it. They moved specifically to aid two dominant conquering tribes in Ghana. And the implication here is critical. They have historically been involved in really high-stakes conflict. They were, in essence, hired guns.
And that status means they exist as this distinct, almost professional military identity. They're placed geographically within the territory of the tribes they were serving, but they're not necessarily fully trusted or integrated.
Precisely. That military origin, that external relationship, it means their integration had to be strategic. It couldn't just be organic.
And the sources seem to reflect that, even in their language. Their original tongue is a Nufo, but now it's a fusion language, right? It's heavily combined with the local language, Toy.
It is. It's a classic case of linguistic adaptation. About 2/3 of the Chikosi population in Ghana speak this fusion, and their settlement location. The sources place them in the savanna grassland bordering Togo. We're talking about a significant concentration here. Roughly 100,000 Jokosi live in that area alone.
That's a group large enough to retain its own identity, but small enough to be constantly sensitive to its neighbors.
And that sensitivity is compounded by the political geography. The documents highlight that they live in an area dominated by two larger, historically rival tribes,
Yeah.
the Mempruzi and the Kankamba.
Okay, now this is where that history of conflict becomes really crucial.
It is. And what's fascinating is the continuous tension. The sources note that the Mempruzi and the Kankamba have this intense, historically antagonistic relationship. So if you're the Chokosi, this smaller group literally sandwiched between these two giants, any external movement, any allegiance you appear to take is immediately viewed through the lens of that existing rivalry.
So if Emmanuel and Christiana, these missionaries coming from the outside, were seen as even subtly aligned with, say, the Mempruzi.
They'd instantly alienate the Kankamba.
And vice versa. And the Chokosi, as a minority, would just instinctively be wary of anything that threatens their delicate diplomatic balance.
Right. This context makes any kind of rapid movement gaining traction incredibly difficult. It risks being seen as a destabilizing outside political force.
It's like walking a tightrope.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now for the final contextual barrier, the religious and historical starting line. This is the crucial fact that really sets the stage for the dramatic growth we see. Historically, the Chokosi were almost completely untouched by Christianity. The sources are explicit about this. Prior to these events, less than 1% of them adhered to the faith.
Less than 1%. That's the definition of a population that is either highly resistant, highly remote, or both. So we're starting with 122,000 people, a complex military-rooted history, living under intense geopolitical pressure and with virtually no existing Christian presence.
Right.
The sources are basically presenting an environment that's engineered for slow, incremental progress. Yet what they got was a 3-month explosion. This is the contrast we have to keep in our minds as we go forward.
That low baseline confirms the scale of the movement. It's just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's move to section 2, the catalyst. We need to dissect the engine of this growth.
Okay, so this is where we meet Emmanuel and Christiana, Emmanuel Skian. He was a recent graduate of a missionary training school, and he was sent to this territory only 3 months before that first celebration church gathering. 3 months ago, he was a total newcomer. Today, he's presiding over a major multi-village assembly.
He was the initial spark, for sure. But the success isn't attributed to his charisma or even his education. It's attributed to the method. The sources describe the work as being based on, and I'm quoting here, simple yet profoundly practical discipleship principles. The whole strategy was one of just steady faithfulness, applying basic movement principles, and what's called obedience-based discipleship.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because it's a complete rejection of the complex, resource-heavy missionary models we often see. It suggests that simplicity and immediate reproducibility were prioritized way over theological complexity or, deep-pocketed infrastructure. So what does that look like in practice? What did they actually do?
Well, they focused on two things: obedience and discovery. Let's start with the Discovery Bible Study, or DBS. This is the core methodology. DBS is a process centered on reading and opening the Bible with people who don't yet follow Jesus, with seekers. But crucially, the process is designed to enable the participants to discover God's truth for themselves.
And that is the powerful shift. If you compare this to a traditional setting, a lecture, a sermon, a classroom, the knowledge transfer is vertical, right? From the expert down to the student. But here, this horizontal discovery model, it makes the movement instantly indigenous. The Chokosi participants are empowered to find the meaning themselves, rather than waiting for Emmanuel or Christiana to deliver the authoritative interpretation.
And that self-discovery is locked in through accountability. To really dig into this, we need to understand the nuts and bolts of a DBS session. A typical DBS session doesn't just read a passage. It uses a set of simple, repeated questions, usually 7 of them, designed to ensure immediate application and multiplication.
Can you walk us through those core questions? Because it feels like the success hinges on how simple and repeatable they are.
Absolutely. So after reading a short passage, the group begins. The first few questions are just about understanding. What does this passage tell us about God? What does this passage tell us about people? Basic comprehension. But then it shifts radically away from just study and into application and multiplication.
Application and multiplication, that has to be the engine of the speed.
It is. The critical questions are, how will you obey this passage this week? That's the obedience-based discipleship part. The focus is on putting the teaching into practice immediately, before you even move on to the next idea.
So it prevents the studies from just becoming academic exercises.
Totally. It keeps it grounded in real life. And then come the final, and maybe the most crucial, questions. Who will you share this story or lesson with this week? And who else will you invite to start a DBS group?
Wow. So the system is designed so that every single participant, even a seeker who just showed up, is instantly aware that they're responsible for both living the teaching and spreading the teaching. It's self-sustaining from day one. That's why the sources stress obedience-based discipleship. It bypasses the slow process of training external leaders by making every participant a potential leader.
It creates this sense of immediate ownership and accessibility. If the chief is participating, he doesn't need a seminary degree to run his own group. He just needs to know the 7 questions and follow the process. And that very low threshold for leadership is absolutely essential to the kind of rapid multiplication we see across 15 villages in 3 months.
But no matter how good the method is, you still need an entry point. You still need a way into a traditionally closed culture. And they paired DBS with a strategy of finding a person of peace.
This is non-negotiable in sensitive, unreached communities. A person of peace is It's a biblical concept, but it's also a critical entry strategy into new communities. It just means finding a local individual or a family who is receptive, influential, and willing to introduce the outsider to their existing social network.
So this local person becomes the social bridge. In the context of the Chikosi, who are so wary of external forces because of that Mamprusi and Kankamba tension, an outside missionary just showing up without that bridge, they'd be viewed with so much suspicion.
Precisely. If Emmanuel and Christiana had just, opened a community center, they would have alienated half the region immediately. But by working through an accepted person of peace, a locally trusted figure, they bypassed all that natural suspicion of an outsider. That local connection granted them instant cultural and social permission that would have taken years to earn otherwise.
That strategy is essential not just for credibility, but for resource management, too. They didn't need to spend time and money establishing infrastructure. They just needed to empower the social networks that were already there. So the DBS method, combined with obedience and the person of peace strategy, it's designed for multiplication, not just slow addition, which is why we see this jump to the quantitative evidence in Section 3.
Right. Let's talk about the metrics, because they're staggering given the 3-month window. The documents state that 90 vibrant discovery Bible studies were flourishing.
90 separate small group studies in 15 different villages. Just think about the exponential curve required to get to that number. If one person of peace introduces the method to 2 friends, and then those 2 friends each start a group with 3 other people, you hit multiplication instantly. You don't need a massive foreign team. You just need focused, reproducible training.
And the numbers confirm this growth model. The sources report an average attendance of 6 or 7 believers or seekers per DBS group. So if we take the lower estimate, 6 people, and multiply that by 90 groups, that totals 540 participants actively engaged.
Over 500 people, who were historically part of a less than 1% Christian population, are now actively involved in a system that demands personal obedience and multiplication, all initiated in 90 days. That's not growth. That's a movement.
It is a profound rate of change. But, the challenge with decentralized groups like this is always maintaining unity and identity. The sources explain the structure of the emerging church that was designed to counter this. So while the DBS groups meet weekly in homes or small settings, all 15 of those study groups convene monthly as a larger celebration church.
Okay, so that serves as the necessary hub. It validates the individual home groups and provides that collective identity that you need for sustainability.
Right.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider donating to help us continue to bring exciting stories fresh from the field. Visit our website at GodNetworkNews.com and select the PayPal link on the right side of the page, or consider becoming a Patreon partner to receive access to more valuable materials exclusive to our members.